kapag may hinuli kang kriminal dito sa ating bansa at hindi tama ang pagkakaaresto, hindi tama ang warrant of arrest, hindi tama yung sistema ng pag-aresto, malamang-lamang i-dismiss ng judge yan dahil hindi po pwedeng magdala sa hustisya kung illegal ang pagkakaaresto. Yon ang tinatawag na fruit of the poisonous tree. Magandang araw mga kapatid, mga kababayan. This is EJ Morse once again. Welcome to my small channel. Ako ay nasa labas ngayon at meron lang akong gustong tapusin na video na naumpisahan ko na. Kaya dito na lang sa aking pagparada, tatapusin ko yung aking naumpisahang video. Ito ay karugtong ng aking vlog tungkol doon sa hearing. Ito yung pinamumunuan na committee ni Amy Marcos at kasama niya rito sina Alan Peter Cayetano, sila Bongo, Bato de la Rosa at ganoon na rin si Jingo Estrada tungkol nga dito sa pag-aresto kay Digong Duterte. Ang issue nila Cayetano rito, nila Amy Marcos ay wala raw legality at hindi raw nabigyan ng tamang due process. So, meron na akong comment dyan tungkol dyan doon sa nakaraang vlog na sinundan nito. Pero may karugtong pa ito. Ito nga yung tungkol naman doon sa example. Ang sinabi ni former Associate Justice Adolfo Ascuna na diyan sa international law ay hindi binibigyan ng halaga kung paano mo na-aresto yung tao at mas importante dito ang binibigyan ng halaga yung bigat or weight ng kaso ng suspect. In this case, ito nga yung suspect natin ay si former President Digong Duterte. So ibig sabihin niya, gaano man ka rough, gaano man ka illegal, paano mo man inaresto ang suspect na gumawa ng karumal-dumal na krimen gaya ng crime against humanity. At importante, madala siya doon sa korte at magkaroon ng pagdinig at later on mahatulan siya kung guilty or not guilty. Mas importante sa kanila yan kaysa doon sa manner ng pagkakaaresto. May example nga nito, yung sinabi naman ni Attorney Toledo na kagaya nung nangyari kay Adolf Eichmann. Ito yung German Nazi na naging kanang kamay o taga-implement ni Adolf Hitler doon sa pag-massacre sa mga Hudyo na umabot yata or umabot more or less ng mga 6 million Jews na pinagpapatay, inilagay ito sa gas chamber at systematically minurder ang mga ito. What? So ito yung ang nangyari sa kanya ay pagkatapos ng gera noong World War II ay naglaho itong parang bula. So nagpalipat-lipat ito ng iba't ibang bansa na nagtatago. Pero naging wanted ito sa Israel. So malaking effort ang ginawa ng Mossad, ito yung intelligence network ng Israel at hinanting ito for so many years. I think inabot ito ng 15 years bago siya matukoy na nando doon sa Argentina.
Adolf Eichmann was one of the chief architects of the Holocaust. When World War II was over, he went on the run, remained a fugitive until 1960, when Israeli agents seized him in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Eichmann's subsequent trial provided a much-needed catharsis for Holocaust survivors, World War II veterans, and war-weary citizens alike. So, Adolf Eichmann was a ruthless Nazi bureaucrat and dedicated anti-Semite who coordinated the transport of people to concentration camps during World War II. After German forces were defeated, Eichmann wound up in an American detention camp in Germany, where he masqueraded as a low-level German soldier named Otto Eckmann. He spent a few months in the POW camp as Eckmann, before slipping out and fleeing to an isolated farmhouse. While other Holocaust organizers were tried for human rights violations and war crimes in Nuremberg, Eichmann hid out and plotted his next moves. Few people outside the Nazi Party knew what he actually looked like, which made it possible for him to venture into northern Germany's British occupation zone. There, he assumed yet another identity, Otto Henninger. He remained on German soil for a few years, evading detection by creating a series of false documents that led authorities to believe he'd fled to the Middle East. Eichmann was in northern Germany. A man in Prague filed a police report claiming he'd seen Eichmann shot to death. A judge almost signed Eichmann's death notice, but reversed his decision when he learned the witness was Karl Liebel, brother-in-law of Eichmann's wife. Vera. It was actually Jewish Holocaust survivor Simon Wiesenthal who aided in foiling Eichmann's plan. Wiesenthal, who'd endured stints in the Ostbahn and Mauthausen camps, signed up to help Allied forces gather war crime evidence for trials. He knew war criminals often evaded prosecution by pretending to be slain under questionable circumstances, when in reality they'd fled to other countries and assumed new identities. After conducting his own investigation, he was able to prove the true identity of the witness who claimed that Eichmann was deceased. Hoping the revelation about Karl Liebel would be the key to ensnaring Eichmann, Wiesenthal eventually got word that Eichmann was still in Germany, with the Hungarian government to request the United States retrieve Eichmann from Germany and extradite him to Hungary, where he could stand trial. But the Americans sat on the request for 4 years, ultimately denying it in 1951 because no definite address or details about Eichmann's crimes were provided. Eichmann traveled all over post-war Europe, using fake identities to get around. He traversed an established escape route for SS members like him, one maintained by loyalists that included border guards, non-profit organizations, religious leaders, and government officials. In 1950, under the name Ricardo Clement, Eichmann traveled from Genoa, Italy, to a new home in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Aided by the Red Cross, high-ranking Vatican officials, and an SS officer turned human smuggler named Horst Carlos Fulgner, Eichmann earned Argentine leader Juan Perón's blessing to resettle in his country. In 1952, Eichmann's wife Vera and his 3 sons were granted a travel visa that allowed them to join Eichmann in Buenos Aires. Once reunited, Vera and Adolf had another son, born on Argentine soil in 1955. Eichmann thrived in Argentina, whose government proved sympathetic to those exiled. He held a succession of labor jobs, from juice farmer to mechanic to laundry worker. His family even owned a rabbit farm. Although he lived as Ricardo Clement on paper, Eichmann wasn't shy about speaking out. The fact that Buenos Aires harbored a large number of international fugitives meant Eichmann was able to surround himself with like-minded people who had no intention of sharing his location with those hunting him. The German government was definitely aware of Eichmann's new life in Argentina, as Eichmann's wife used proper legal channels to reconnect with her husband in Buenos Aires. Why the Germans didn't act on this sooner is a great mystery. In 1958, the American CIA was made aware by West Germans that Eichmann was living in South America. However, they too refused to get involved because America was too caught up in the Cold War with the Soviet Union to put any resources toward this matter. In 1989, Simon Wiesenthal claimed he had informed the Israeli government of Eichmann's life in Buenos Aires in 1954, but Mossad, Israel's national intelligence agency, countered Wiesenthal's claims by saying Wiesenthal's information at the time placed Eichmann in Saudi Arabia or Japan, not Argentina. Lothar Hermann spent most of 1935 and 1936 in the Dachau concentration camp, where he was regularly beaten and starved. He managed to get out of Germany in 1938 and relocated to Argentina as a war refugee. After he fled his home, Hermann lost his sight due to the physical torture he suffered in Dachau. Disguised as non-Jewish Germans, Hermann started a new life with his wife and daughter Sylvia in the Olivos area of Buenos Aires. In the 1950s, Sylvia started dating a young man named Klaus Eichmann, who lived just a few doors away. Klaus expressed anti-Semitic views and said he regretted that Nazis weren't able to exterminate all Jewish people. He also bragged about his father serving in the war. The Hermanns later moved outside Buenos Aires to Coronel Suarez. Around this time, in 1957, details of a prominent Gestapo officer's criminal trial in Frankfurt, Germany were picked up by newspapers around the world. Lothar Hermann read these accounts, and when Eichmann's name popped up during the proceedings, Hermann grew suspicious of the boy who dated his daughter. He reached out by letter to Judge Fritz Bauer, who was overseeing the trial in Frankfurt. Hermann wrote he believed Adolf Eichmann was his neighbor in Olivos, and the father of Sylvia's former boyfriend. Bauer wrote back to Lothar Hermann, giving him a general description of Eichmann, but said he needed more details, like an exact address, in order to go forward with pursuing him. Hermann and Sylvia flew back to Buenos Aires, where Sylvia knocked on the door of the house she remembered as Klaus's. A middle-aged man answered, and Sylvia asked him if he was Herr Eichmann. The man didn't say yes, but he did admit to being Klaus's father. The Hermanns believed they had their man. When Bauer got confirmation that Eichmann was in Buenos Aires, he sent a covert message to Mossad in Israel instead of notifying the German government. Make sure Eichmann would be caught off guard. In early 1958, Mossad sent agent Yoel Goren to Buenos Aires. Goren concluded there was no way Eichmann, a wanted Nazi war criminal, lived in a middle-class neighborhood like Olivos. Hoping to convince Mossad to reevaluate their decision, Bauer revealed Lothar Hermann's identity to them. Mossad's leader, Isser Harel, sent another agent to Argentina to meet with Hermann and Coronel Suarez. The agent, Ephraim Hofstetter, gave Hermann $130 and a task: obtain a copy of Eichmann's Argentine ID. Hermann reported back that Eichmann may be using the alias Francisco Schmidt, who was listed as the owner of the house occupied by Mossad. Agents concluded Schmidt was not Eichmann and began to distance themselves from Hermann's claims again. Bauer, frustrated by Mossad's attitude toward Herman, intervened. He visited Israel, where information from a news source indicated Eichmann was living in the home mentioned by Herman. Instead of owning the home, Eichmann was a tenant using the name Ricardo Clement. Bauer did not hold back his frustration with Mossad, reportedly yelling at them, "Any second-class policeman would be able to follow such a lead. Just go ask the nearest butcher or greengrocer and you will learn all there is to know about Clement." On March 1st, 1960, Mossad agent Zvi Aharoni arrived in Buenos Aires. On March 3rd, he traveled to Olivos by car, where he drove up to the two-story home that Lothar Hermann believed was the Eichmann resident. A local student contracted by Mossad knocked on the door, but no one answered. They soon found out the occupants had moved out just a few weeks earlier. They did more snooping, discovering one of the sons who'd lived in the house worked at an auto repair shop down the street. After trailing the boy for some days, they were led to an isolated, newly built home on the outskirts of town. Aharoni felt he was getting closer, as he knew the boy's name was Dieter, the same name as Eichmann's third son. All came together when Aharoni discovered the house Dieter kept returning to was registered under the name of Veronica Katharina Liebel Eichmann, or Vera Eichmann. There was no doubt in Aharoni's mind that Ricardo Clement was Adolf Eichmann. Aharoni clandestinely shot a few photos of the older Eichmann from a distance to show his bosses back in Israel, and they agreed with him. Lothar Hermann was finally vindicated. Rafi Eitan was an agent who served in both Mossad and Shin Bet, Israel's internal security system. Eitan gathered a large team of both Mossad and Shin Bet agents who converged in Argentina in early May 1960. They covertly scoped out Eichmann's new house and connected streets, gathering intel and preparing to make their move. Mossad had no intention of working with the Argentine government to apprehend Eichmann. Knowing they'd harbored Eichmann for so long, Eitan instead hatched a plan to kidnap Eichmann and secretly smuggle him out of the country. They used Mossad agent Peter Malkin as a strongman to take Eichmann down when the moment came. Meanwhile, Mossad used Argentina's 150th independence anniversary as a pretext to send a special plane from Israel to Argentina. The Argentine government believed Israel wanted to send representatives to attend the festivities. In reality, they planned to use the plane to carry Eichmann far away. By May 1960, Eichmann was working at a local Mercedes-Benz factory, using public buses to get to and from his job. Well versed in Eichmann's daily routine, 2 cars full of Mossad and Shin Bet agents headed toward his bus stop ahead of Eichmann's usual arrival time at 7:40 p.m. It was May 11th. When the bus pulled up, Eichmann was nowhere to be found. By 8 p.m., there was still no sign of him. 5 minutes later, Eichmann was spotted traversing the unpaved, barren road that led toward his home. "Un momentito, senor," Agent Peter Malkin said before grabbing Eichmann. With Zvi Aharoni driving, the crew managed to get the stunned Eichmann to a safe house. Once Eichmann became aware of the situation, it didn't take long for him to break, and he quickly admitted his true identity. Eichmann and the Israeli agents tasked with capturing him remained in the safe house until it was time for them to board a plane out of Argentina. In order to ensure Eichmann wouldn't ruin the operation, Mossad hired an Israeli anesthesiologist to administer a sedative to Eichmann before the flight. Instead of knocking him out, Eichmann was given just enough to make him woozy. Eichmann, forced to don an airline uniform, was then disguised as a sick crew member. Agents managed to get him on board the plane without the Argentine government's awareness, and the plane took off without issue. While other Nazi war criminals were tried in German courts, the Israelis wanted to try Eichmann themselves. This was viewed as a controversial decision at the time, and was exacerbated by Argentina's claims its sovereignty was infringed, and its laws against abduction were flouted. The uproar was short-lived, however, considering what Eichmann was responsible for and what he bragged about doing while in Argentina. Hundreds of journalists descended upon Israel in 1961 for Eichmann's trial. The trial was broadcast on television. Much of the world watched with bated breath. Over 100 Jewish Holocaust survivors provided testimony about their horrendous experiences. Eichmann presented himself as a consummate bureaucrat who completed the tasks designated to him out of a sense of duty. He also tried to make the case he didn't directly order any murders or deaths. Instead of a monstrous butcher, Eichmann looked and acted like a meek pencilsher. This later prompted political theorist and Jewish German refugee Hannah Arendt to coin the term the banality of evil. Eichmann's guilty verdict was no surprise to anyone, yet Israeli courts set a new precedent for themselves by condemning him to death. Israel's prime minister at the time, David Ben-Gurion, was opposed to the death penalty, but he made an exception for Eichmann, whose life ended by hanging on May 31st, 1962.
Doon din nakilala, doon nagmarka ang pangalang Mossad, yung intelligence network ng Israel kung paano sila magtrabaho. Nung makarating sila dyan sa Argentina, umupa sila ng bahay na hindi kalayuan dyan sa bahay na tinitirahan naman ni Adolf Eichmann. So sinundan nila, sinubaybayan nila for how many days yan, yung activity niya, anong oras lumalabas, anong oras umuwi, at pagdating ng bahay, ano ang kanyang ginagawa. So finally, nung nag-decide na kukunin na nila si Eichmann, inabangan nila yan, medyo madilim na, pakagat na yung, actually madilim na, At yung oras na pagdating ni Eichmann, unfortunately, ay nung oras na kukunin nila si Eichmann, hindi dumating sa oras. So, nag-antay sila, humigit kumulang ng mga 2 oras. Nagsumusurrender na nga yung ibang ahente at gusto nang umuwi dahil parang hindi na darating. At finally, after 2 hours mahigit, dumating itong si Eichmann. At yung plano nila na dakmain ito at nagpambuno pa nga nung isang ahente diyan sa kalsada or sa tabing daan at hindi agad natakpan yung bibig nito kaya naghihiyaw ito. Ang ginawa naman ng isang ahente na nasa loob ng kotse ay tinodo yung kanyang radyo para hindi masyadong marinig yung sigaw ni Eichmann doon sa bahay. Kasi tanaw na yung bahay nitong si Eichmann. So nung finally maisakay siya sa loob ng kotse at dinala na nga doon sa kanilang inuupahang bahay. So doon sa inuupang bahay, dapat naka-schedule agad yung pagdating ng eroplano, itong commercial plane or airplane from Israel, nagkaroon pa ng delay. So mahigit parang halos inabot ng 1 week na bago dumating yung eroplano para isasakay na nga itong si Eichmann. So kabadong-kabado itong mga Mossad agent kasi kinidnap nila. So yung mga time na yan, alam nila may naghahanap na, hinahanap ng pamilya niya itong si Eichmann. So talagang uneasy na. Kinakabahan na itong mga Mossad agents na to dahil alam nila marami na naghahanap, pati mga pulis diyan kay Eichmann dahil bigla na lang siyang nawala at hindi nakarating sa bahay nila. So, nung dumating naman ang eroplano na relieve sila at ang inisip nila ang paraan dahil siyempre mag-i-inspection ng immigration dyan. So, ang ginawa nila, drinag nila ito, in-injection na nito ng droga para hindi na makapagsalita. Talagang lupaypay itong si Eichmann nung sinakay nila sa eroplano at pinagsuot nila ng uniforme ng isang crew member ng eroplano. So, ang nangyari niyan, nung nag-inspect yung immigration officer, yun nga, nakalugmok or hindi na kumitibo sa upuan nitong si Eichmann. Ang sinabi na lang nila, ito ay isang member ng crew, kaya lang lasing na lasing dahil galing sa party nung gabi. So, nakalusot naman yun, yung palusot nila na yun at sinabi nga na first time nila makakita ng crew ng eroplano na lasing na lasing. So, yun na nga, in short, nadala nila sa Israel at nung actually, medyo ano nga ito, may trivia pa rito, nahuli ito, nakidnap ito, nakuha ng mga Mossad agent noong May 11, 1960. At si Digong naman ay na-aresto March 11, 2025. So pagdating ng April 11 naman ay na harap sa korte at na nalitis at nung finally makonvict siya, ito ay binitay.
Wow.
At nung mabitay ito around May 1962 ay agad-agad ito crenimate at dinala sa barko, naglayag yung barko, yung kanyang remains o yung kanyang abo ay hinulog doon sa dagat.
Wow.
So ang reason dito, hindi po pwede kasing ilibing itong yung mga ganitong klaseng personality na very yung known sa public at saka yung baka may mga followers pa ito, ang abo nito ay hinuhulog sa dagat. In this case, yung Israel, dinala pa siya talaga outside the territory of Israel at doon nilaglag yung kanyang abo. Ayaw nilang ilaglag ito, yung kanyang abo, doon sa territory ng Israel. So yun ang symbolic niyan, na ayaw nila na yung kanilang teritoryo ay doon malibing o doon mapunta yung abo nitong si Adolf Eichmann na isang murderer na pumatay ng 6 million Jews noong panahon ng World War II. Gaya din ito nung pagkamatay ni Osama bin Laden, nung yung kanyang ashes, yung kanyang remains ay hinulog din sa dagat. Dahil ayaw din ng kanino mang bansa na ma-identify na nandoon itong si Osama bin Laden dahil baka hanapin ito ng mga followers niya. At magkaroon ng mga unnecessary or mga gulo-gulo dahil gawin pa siyang martir at puntahan yung kanyang libing. So, Ganun nga din ang ginawa kay Osama Bin Laden. So anong punto rito? Diniscuss ko ito dahil nga ito related doon sa sinabi ni Attorney Karen Jimeno na dito sa Pilipinas meron tayong tinatawag na fruit of a poisonous tree. Meron tayong batas na ang pagkakahuli sa'yo o ang pagkakaaresto sa'yo ay hindi pasok or hindi legal or illegal ang pagkakaaresto sa'yo, dito sa ating bansa ay nadidismiss ang kaso. Yan ang tinatawag na fruit of a poisonous tree. Ibig sabihin, kung i-relate natin talaga sa prutas, kahit na gaano ka hitik at gaano ka sarap ang itsura ng prutas, pag yan ay binigay mo doon sa judge, hindi kakainin yan. Dahil yan ay mayroon lason. Sabihin, ikaw, pag may hinuli kang kriminal dito sa ating bansa at hindi tama ang pagkakaaresto, hindi tama ang warrant of arrest, hindi tama yung sistema na pag-aresto, malamang-lamang i-dismiss ng judge yan dahil hindi po pwedeng mag-aresto, hindi ka pwedeng magdala sa hustisya, sa judge ng isang kriminal na hindi wasto or hindi tama ang pagkakaaresto. Kung illegal ang pagkakaaresto. Yun ang tinatawag na fruit of the poisonous tree. Na sinasabi nga ni former Justice Ascuna, sa international law ay hindi ganito. Mas binibigyan ng weight, mas binibigyan ng halaga kung ano yung malaking krimen na nagawa ng suspect rather than the minor infraction na doon sa maling pagkakaaresto. Kung mali man yung warrant of arrest, kung hindi tama yung warrant of arrest at hindi tama yung ginawang pag-aresto, baliwala sa international law yan. Mas binibigyan ng weight yung malaking krimen na nagawa nung hinuling person, nung hinuling personality. So, yun naman ang kontra or contrary doon sa fruit of the poisonous tree. So, yan po ang karugtong ng ating vlog na so, sinasabi natin dito, pinagdidiinan kasi nila na hindi nabigyan ng tamang due process itong si Digong Duterte. Maaaring tama sila, gaya na rin sa sinabi ni Justice Ascuna, but then again, doon sa international law, baliwalang lahat ito. Kahit na illegal ang pagkakaaresto niya, ang importante nadala siya at doon lilitisin na siya sa ICC, International Criminal Court. So sana matapos na ang usapin tungkol dito dahil kahit anong gawin pa nilang ngaw-ngaw ay tatanggapin ng ICC ang katauhan ni Digong Duterte kahit na mali ang pagkakaaresto rito. So ngayon, itong mga ginagawa nila Amy Marcos, Cayetano at iba pa, alam naman nila, naintindihan din naman nila ang sinasabi ni Adolfo Ascuna. But then again, itong si Amy Marcos, kailangan na exposure. Itong si Bongo, kailangan na exposure. Ganoon na rin si Bato de la Rosa. At itong si Cayetano, gusto na rin ipakita yung kanyang loyalty dito kay Digong Duterte, kaya nila ginagawa ito. So yun lang po ang reason. Ganoon na rin po si Jingo Estrada. Pinapakita niya ang kanyang utang na loob, ang kanyang loyalty kay Digong Duterte, kaya nila pinagtutulong-tulungan nila ang representative ng gobyerno para ipakita ang kanilang loyalty sa kanilang poon na si Digong Duterte. At ang iba naman na may tumatakbo for re-election, nangangailangan sila ng exposure, kaya nila ginagawa ito. So yun lang po mga kapatid, mga kababayan, bilang closure sa issue na to sa pagkakaaresto ni former President Digong Duterte. Maraming salamat po at doon po sa mga bago lang dito sa aking channel, kindly subscribe, kindly hit na notification bell, pati na rin yung like button at pakishare na rin po nang sa ganoon maraming makarinig ng ating vlog at ang ating episode tungkol sa pagkakaaresto dito kay former President Digong Duterte. At again, thank you so much. Magkita-kita po tayong muli.